Greetings to everybody. My name is Neeshan Balton from the Ahmed Kathrada Foundation. The foundation, together with the Public Affairs Research Institute, PARI, welcomes you here this morning to this important webinar focusing on whistleblowers and the need to support, protect, and assist whistleblowers in all the work that they do and the work that needs to be done. Today's program is one that is hugely important for us. PARI will also be launching an important toolkit on whistleblowing. We have presentations from a number of organizations who work on the issue of whistleblowers and whistleblower support and whistleblower mechanisms. That's OUTA, Corruption Watch, and Citizens of Conscience. The Q&A facility or the chat facility to just raise your questions throughout or your comments throughout, so that when we get to the Q&A section, the various speakers are able to respond to the issues that you think are important for them to respond to. So once more, greetings to everybody who've taken time out to be here this morning. And we're going to ask from the Kathrada Foundation, the Deputy Chairperson of the Board, Mandla and Nkomfe, to do the opening and welcome to everybody on this webinar. Mandla, over to you.
Thank you very much, Chairperson Neeshan Balton. And good morning to the colleagues who are here. Let me start by saying that today would have marked what would have been Comrade Lalu Iso Chiba's 90th birthday anniversary. As we all know, Chiba was a member of the Kathrada Foundation's board. He was also a former Robben Island prisoner, having served 18 years on the island. Those who knew Comrade Chiba remember him as an unflinching character in standing up to injustice of any kind. During his tenure on Parliament's Standing Committee on Public Accounts, people knew him as, in quote, the white-haired man, close quote, whose path you would not want to cross if you had a case to answer for. Before he passed on, following on the lead from his fellow comrade, Comrade Ahmed Kathrada, Chiba wrote his own letter to former President Zuma, expressing his dismay at his conduct and calling on him to step down. The reason why I'm highlighting all of this today is because we are here to talk in the main about people who have been similarly unflinching in exposing corruption. These are people who are prepared to speak out when they see something wrong, despite it being unpopular to do so. Whistleblowers speak out at a high risk of being labeled impimpis or troublemakers and of being suspended or dragged through disciplinary or lengthy court processes. They speak out despite the fear that they may not be able to find a job again. They speak out putting their lives and that of loved ones on the line. Once they speak out, as we know, more often than not, they are all on their own. Recently, whistleblower Bianca Goodson wrote an open letter to Eskom CEO, Andrew de Ruyter, highlighting her plight. Despite displaying her integrity by dodging or by exposing dodgy deals between Eskom, Trillion, and Mackenzie, Godson could not find a job to support her daughter. Other whistleblowers share similar tales of being vilified by society for doing the right thing. Today's webinar is about how we change this so that whistleblowers are not alone in their endeavors. what are the ways in which civil society and other stakeholders can support as well as protect whistleblowers? Should we be incentivizing whistleblowers? And if so, how? How do we practically take forward the ideas that this webinar may generate in the course of the discussions? We must be clear that while many whistleblowers are driven by their integrity and ethics, others may simply want to save their own skin after years of complicity in their organizations. And in this instance, should we be acknowledging that in the main, while at the same time we may not like these actors, and while they must face justice, what is important, their testimonies are to catching up what we call kingpins, and as well as crucial in disrupting corrupt networks. These are some of the issues that today we'll have to grapple with. Just to take from a former colleague and a colleague of Lalu Chiba, Professor Raymond Sadner, a few years ago, in a tribute to Lalu, Isu Chiba wrote, I quote, "Isu is a brave person. That much is known about his political life. But bravery means something different in 2010 from 1964 or in the mid-80s, 1980s. And it relates to other qualities of Comrade Isu." And Sadner goes on then to detail quite a number of other qualities that Comrade Isu has. In our context today, where all levels of the state, corruption and capture is becoming endemic, the key question is, what does it mean to be brave? How can we encourage this bravery to a point where whistleblowing becomes kind, particularly it becomes country duty, as it were. Mosilo Motebo in Mendy Wendy's recent book captures what it means to be a whistleblower. And I quote her, she says, "We are heroes, we are warriors," close quote. So today, as we honor one of our heroes of old, Lalu Chiba, let us give practical meaning to how we can honor and better support today's heroes, the ethical whistleblowers who are on the front lines of fighting corruption. In those few words, Chairperson, I would like to thank you on behalf of the Ahmad Kathrada Foundation and wishing you best wishes for the deliberation today, and hoping that out of this conference, practical steps will be taken to protect whistleblowers. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mandla. Thank you very much. We move on. We just got a note from Cynthia Stimpel that she will join at some point. But the program now moves over to Florencia Belvedere. Now, Florencia joined PARI in 2018 and is the coordinator of its state reform program. Prior to this, she worked as a senior manager in government for 8 years and at both legal and research civil society organizations. She is an admitted attorney and holds a PhD in politics from the University of Minnesota. Florencia, over to you to talk to us about the PARI toolkit and to, in essence, launch this toolkit today. And on behalf of everybody here, I think we want to thank PARI for this initiative and for all that it does as well. Over to you, Florencia.
Thank you very much, Sean, and thank you, everyone. Yes, indeed, we wanted to use this opportunity, given that whistleblowers and those who report are contributing so much to governance issues in our country, and particularly now, I think every day we see how important the work of people who blow the whistle is. At PARI, we've been working on a program, on a project that is funded by the Open Society Foundation that is about knowing your state and looking at ways in terms of how do we improve accountability and governance. And one of the aspects of this project was to put together a toolkit that would assist public servants who might find themselves in situations where they might want to report wrongdoing or unethical behavior, or are being asked to engage in such behavior. And through our consultations with unions and civil society organizations as well, one of the things that came up was that a lot of times people don't know enough about the procedure for doing that. So what we wanted to do was not only to look at the procedure, and let me be very clear that PARI in this endeavor has relied on the work that has come before PARI did this project, which is there's a number of organizations that have put together different manuals or fact sheets or information for whistleblowers. And what we've done is we brought some of that together. We also didn't want to just look at whistleblowing, but also think about, when we think about whistleblowing, is if we get to the point of whistleblowing, that means that then our institutions haven't worked so well. And so what we need to focus on is that we build a culture of, an ethical organizational culture in government. So the toolkit, which is, I'm not going to project it because the time is quite limited, but it is on our website, has two parts. The first part kind of gives a background to what are the different initiatives and policies that exist to make public servants accountable in government. We take it kind of through the years, the different initiatives that have been taken by the Public Service Commission and by the Department of Public Service and Administration, what's also in the NDP, to give a bit of an overarching sense of this is the framework, these are the expectations, these are the kinds of things that senior managers must do, that every public servant must adhere to. And then part two goes into a much more practical guide on the steps to take on disclosures, to decide to make a disclosure and how to do it. Because a lot of times we know that people who have the courage and the bravery to stand up and do the right thing are taken to task for not following the right procedure, or for disclosing information that is confidential. So we look in part B of this toolkit in detail into the Protected Disclosures Act. And we look at also at some of the changes that were brought on in 2017, because there was some strengthening of the Protected Disclosures Act in 2017. I think key amongst them, the definition of employer was broadened. It includes former employees, and workers, so third parties. It also has a very important clause which protects whistleblowers from criminal or civil liability that is brought on by an employer on the pretext or the excuse that you disclosed confidential information to blow the whistle, which I think is actually something very critical, because remember, what a lot of times we find in government is that a lot of the focus is on shooting the messenger rather than indeed investigating the wrongdoing or the unethical behavior that person is trying to report. And so that aspect of confidentiality clauses cannot save employers. I think it's critical, it's very important, because it also, I think, reduces some of the basis for the retaliation. that many of those who report encounter at the hands of their employers. And there's also, very importantly, also a lot of emphasis on communication with the people who report. So not only about the status of what you reported and how and to whom, but also that there need to be procedures in place in an organization. So the access that the public service regulation says that, and also importantly, at least in the public service, it says that the reporting should be allowed to be confidential. It must be confidential, which is not something that we find in the Protected Disclosures Act necessarily for the private sector. So the toolkit has those two aspects, and it does include as well a key sets some ideas or do's and don'ts. Because one of the things that I think comes out very clearly is that when an individual is reporting something, the importance of good faith is critical, right? I know that people might want to report out of revenge or the feeling like not valued at all, right? Of wanting to get back at somebody for how one is treated. But the concern is that these disclosures, the importance of good faith is quite critical. And we try to also in the toolkit to give an idea of what is this notion of good faith and what is the idea of reasonable belief that what one is disclosing is true, which a lot of times is used against those who report. So that's in a nutshell the toolkit. I think some of the things that have come out from having done this work, indeed, I mean, we do have over 30 organizations that are prescribed in legislation where people can go and blow the whistle. So it's not just the public protector, it's not just the Auditor General, there's like I said, over 30. And one of the things we've done in this toolkit, because we wanted to keep it accessible, is that the electronic version has a number of hyperlinks that allows the reader to go to the different pieces of whether it is legislation or regulations, so that it is indeed gives you a set of tools that could help you in taking any action forward in terms of reporting. But in terms of, when I think about what civil society could do, I think one of the things that comes out very clearly, we have very strong court processes, right? We can always resort to the courts. It's what that one area of the state where we can still count on. But it can become actually quite expensive, right? Because the moment that somebody reports, then this retaliation that whistleblowers are meant to be protected from. And then the next thing is that a whistleblower must run to court to stop it. I mean, the remedy to go to court is there, but it's expensive. And it's physically, psychologically quite exhausting. So I think one of the things that we need to think about is that in countries like Ghana or in South Korea, you've got your commissions for human rights, who take a very active role in protecting whistleblowers and issuing orders of cease and desist. In other words, that an employer cannot attempt to retaliate by coming up with some misconduct charge until the actual essence of the reporting is dealt with. So that provides a protection to the whistleblower as well in the course of this process of investigation. Okay, it doesn't mean that that individual will feel ostracized, or it probably will happen, but at least it's a way of not having to incur all these costs of having to now resort to the courts to interdict an employer from pushing a dismissal or something. And I think the other aspect that to me is, of course, the issue of incentivizing whistleblowers, I think is something that is well worth South Africa thinking about. As PARI, we have advocated for that in terms of public procurement, as something to be included in the public procurement bill. following, for instance, the example of the False Claims Act in the United States. And the other thing that we've got to do is actually have a way of providing advice to whistleblowers. Because, I mean, right now, there is certainly the Public Service Commission has a hotline, but I think it's also limited in terms of that interaction with those individuals that might want to report. There's ethics officers are meant to be playing a critical role in terms of the public service and administration. A lot of the guidelines and in terms of the public service regulations linked to protecting to ethical conduct in the public service. Ethics officers are meant to play a much more important role in guiding and supporting those who want to report and whistleblowers, but that is an area that is still in its infancy, I would say. There's still the resources required to run those committees. There's still a lot of room for improvement. So, and lastly, I think that anybody who's been a whistleblower there should be a way of identifying those individuals who have gone through this, who stood up, to be on a short list for appointment onto boards of SOEs and critical governance structures. Because these are the kinds of principles that you can't necessarily teach through a course. When you find somebody who has the integrity to stand up and to put up with all the hardships that means, that person is invaluable. And that's why it's the irony that individuals who stand by their principles and do the right things are now in a situation where they cannot pay their bills or cannot find future employment. So I think that's what we should be pushing. If anything, a lot of what we've seen in the Zondo Commission tells us, I mean, even Zondo himself has been exasperated, saying talking about Ms. Kwinana, saying there is something wrong with how people like you get appointed to boards. So I think he gets it, and this might be the time to strike. So let me stop there. I think I've said enough. I'm very happy to take questions from others. Thanks, Sean.
Thank you, and thanks Zakira for putting up the link to the toolkit, and it's also available on the PARI website. And I would urge everybody to go through it. I didn't know that there were at least 30 channels for taking forward whistleblowing reports and so forth, and that on its own, I think, is of immense value. We go on to Stefanie Fick, Advocate Stefanie Fick, who joined OUTA in 2017 and is now the Executive Director of the Accountability Division at OUTA. Stefanie started her career in the Department of Justice at the age of 17, while doing a degree in law. She has worked as a state prosecutor and a senior state advocate, and has over 26 years of experience in the judicial system, which she brings to bear in the pursuit of OUTA's work. Stefanie, over to you. Just talk to us about OUTA, its work with regards to whistleblowers, and picking up on some of the work that Florencia has hinted at here as well. Over to you.
Thank you so much. I think that everyone listening today and everyone here, and thank you for arranging this. I think it doesn't matter how many solutions we come up with. A forum like this is one of the most important things in order, get the conversation going. And the more you talk about it and bring awareness, the better we can find solutions. So OUTA is also one of the organization. We challenge maladministration and corruption, irrational legislation and policy, and also trying in local government, to assist with just the sheer lack of service delivery we do there. In order to do our work, one of the most important things is the whistleblower. We receive an enormous amount of information and evidence from whistleblowers. So I can also, on behalf of OUTA, say that we are able to do our work because of so many brave people. so we use the information, take it, use it, then if we decide that it falls within our mandate, we are project driven, we have project managers, but we are also very fortunate. We've got legal project managers, but also fortunate that we have investigators. So if someone entrusts the information, we then are able to do a little bit of investigations in order to see if the most important is to hold to account. I think everyone will agree, and that problem we are experiencing with whistleblowers, that they do not get what they are supposed to get. It's because there are no accountability. With, just thinking back, state capture, what has that done to just accountability, and the many lives of very brave people that try to blow the whistle, that is still, there's still consequences for them. So back to OUTA. So what we find very important is, if a whistleblower wants to remain anonymous, protecting the identity is extremely, extremely important to us. Even if we receive information that we can't use because we are protecting the whistleblower, we then rather do our own investigation, just in order to make sure that that person that was willing to put his or her hand up, that their identity is protected. So what we've done is we have a whistleblower platform on our website, and we use Whisply. And our main focus is security. So what Whisply gives us is security, because OUTA understands the need to safeguard data exchanged on this platform. And then again, the identity of whistleblowers. Now on this platform, everybody else doesn't have access to the whistleblowers' data. It is not shared with third parties, and it's a very easy to use interface. Informants can quickly submit their information, and then case managers can gather the elements needed. It is this platform, according to Whistler, and while using this, is to reduce friction, but build a dedicated user onboarding experience to ensure that the case managers or case managers in this sense is the investigator that was appointed to deal with this matter, can quickly share information. So what this platform also does is that people can communicate via a various number of challenges. You still find whistleblowers that is a bit reluctant to over the phone because maybe someone will listen in, but then you can send an email. You sort of receive an account on our whistleblower platform, so you don't know who else is on there, and you can have a very confidential conversation with an investigator who then, if necessary, can meet you in person. So OUTA is also proud of our investigation department, who knows how to deal with whistleblowers and who knows how to get information from people that may feel, they're afraid and they're scared. Is to deal with them and try and get the information from them. So again, I want to reiterate, we pride ourselves on the fact that if you want to remain anonymous, that you will remain anonymous. And we will then take it upon ourselves to take that information and try and hold people to account, the things that the informant is complaining about. But not in all instances whistleblowers wants to remain anonymous. I mean, just in this room, Cynthia Stimpel, without you, without you, I do not think that Dudu Mnyeni would have faced any accountability. We had the privilege of listening to her yesterday, and unfortunately, she is not sure about a lot of things, and answering questions may incriminate herself. But due to very, very brave people trusting information, trusting OUTA with information, we were able to, on behalf of civil society, say, we are not waiting for law enforcement. We are not waiting, for government to take steps against a chairperson. And that we will do this on behalf of civil society and hold a chairperson to account for being a delinquent director. And that, again, I want to reiterate, would not have been possible without the support of Cynthia Stimpel, Tulium Share, and all the other people that were also willing to testify and put their names out there saying, you know what, this is the shenanigans that went on in SAA. And so it goes for many SOEs, where Bianca Goodson, that was another example that was mentioned. Now, what whistleblowers normally need, it is, I think it's not really right for me to say what a whistleblower needs. I can only objectively tell you that, and from experience dealing with witnesses whose lives are threatened, is that there's many layers. I think whistleblowers firstly needs financial support, always, because fighting a disciplinary hearing, fighting false allegations, unfortunately sometimes takes money. Emotional support. I think to feel that you are standing alone and fighting specifically with government that we all see as this, big, huge machine, fighting against an individual, and standing up takes an enormous amount of courage, but an enormous amount of emotional support in order to stay there. And then I think the biggest problem we are facing is, what happens afterwards? Life goes on. I think that just life happens. And people, while you are busy and while you are fighting, people are with you. But when you go home and you are alone, and afterwards, when you are struggling to get a job, who are they? And that is the type of questions I think that needs to be answered very soon. Because as we've seen, and I would like to refer to state capture again, is that I think, if I want to be negative, is I think we should have seen more whistleblowers. And why didn't we? Because in all honesty, I think it's sometimes just too hard. And it's just not worth it. Some people just resign. Some people find it easier to just resign and leave. Now at OUTA, to just come back to the services sort of that we offered, we've been thinking about expanding our whistleblower policy. At this point in time, we don't necessarily give people financial support and in order to fight your disciplinary hearings, due to the fact that it is not necessarily within our mandate. That is not to say that we will leave you high and dry. If it is a type of matter that we will not be able to deal with, I think we are responsible enough to make sure that the person gets the support they need. If it's emotional support, go to the people that can give you emotional support. Now, I was asked, for example, what are the key gaps in whistleblowing protection and support? I think it's over the whole spectrum. I think it's policy, I think it's legal, I think it's emotional, and it's financial. If you put me in a corner and you say, but pick one, I think it is one of policy. I think it's this whole negative connotation to, you are an impimpi. We trust you. You can't talk out. You can't tell everybody else what is happening in the company, in government. You are supposed to keep quiet. And I want to refer back to what was happening with state capture, why we didn't see more people coming forward and saying, listen, this is unacceptable, is because in our society, I think, it is not totally acceptable. Yes, we applaud bravery. Yes, we take our hats off to the people that takes the very big steps, but why don't we do it? If you ask yourself, if someone sits in front of you and say, in order to blow the whistle, yes, you'll probably, you run the risk of being persecuted, you run the risk of losing your job, you run the risk of not getting a job at all. Who will on earth will put their hands up to whistleblow? But it's because as a society, I think that there's not enough space for people to be brave. In other words, there should be conversation in civil society that if you don't do it, you are the one that is looked at. So it should be the rule, not the exception. And how do we get there? Except for the fact that hopefully with the State Capture Commission, we will get to answers as to why state capture happened. What can we change in order to make sure that there is accountability, that the corrupt people are removed immediately, that we look at people on boards. And I applaud that. I applaud the fact that shouldn't we look at brave people to be appointed on boards? That it really is a thing of, I want to do it. And I was also thinking about it maybe in terms of other possibilities, legislation. Just imagine this, that if you can force government and you can force any company to have a whistleblower platform, and I'm not talking about the ethics officer that makes provision for blowing the whistle, but an independent sort of organization that the state pays for and the company pays for. And if you are in trouble, that your finances are covered, that you go through a disciplinary hearing with legal support and emotional support. And only at the end is there some kind of fail-safe, that if you wasted everyone's time and you've basically put this whistleblower society in disrepute, that there's steps to be taken against you. So that will take out any, and that you don't necessarily lose your job, because unfortunately, I do not know why companies do not want to employ someone that is honest. And unfortunately, in civil society, you can't cater for everyone that is left out in the cold. But why should a whistleblower necessarily lose their job? I mean, honestly, can someone tell me why can't the person that's corrupt not lose their jobs? But let me move on. Do I consider should whistleblowing be awarded? If you work in the criminal justice system, there's always been a system of rewarding informants. In other words, informants will get money. If the intelligence pays out, they will get money. I actually want to say something controversial. I don't think whistleblowers should, there shouldn't be incentives for whistleblowers. It should be, that's why we should have a whistleblowing society. So you should be proud of the fact that you blew the whistle. But if you get other...
1 minute left. 1 minute left.
Thank you so much. If you get financial support and if you get the emotional support that you need, and that the consequences of you blowing whistle is someone being held accountable, then I don't think there should it's necessary for incentives. But as it currently stands, that yes, one would like to give something to someone that really puts their basically their life on the line. So let me end off. In summary, I just want to say, I think what can we as civil society do is do what we are doing and keep on doing it. Being the voice for whistleblowers to say, we need to look at whistleblowing, because everything in whistleblowing in South Africa not in order. We need to stand strong, have these conversations, and thank you for all the organizations that are thinking about it. Keep it there so that the conversation do not die out, and that we can create awareness, and that we can educate our youth, and that we can stop. I also want to say, except for looking at better whistleblowing legislation, etc., let's stop crime. Let's look at corruption and why corruption is being committed. Thank you so much. I can go on all day. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And thanks for not going on and on. Huge thanks to you, and thanks to OUTA. There are a couple of issues that people have raised, and we'll come back to that in the question section. The other organization that we've asked to just share some of their work today is Corruption Watch, represented here by Karam Singh, who joined Corruption Watch in 2019 as the head of legal affairs and investigations. He is an attorney who has worked in public interest legal NGOs, the SA Human Rights Commission, and the SIU. Karam has an LLB, LLM, as well as a JD from Georgetown University. I'm not sure what JD is, but Karam can tell us more about that. Karam, over to you to talk to us about Corruption Watch, its work on whistleblowers, and also its thoughts on what needs to be done to protect and take forward the work of whistleblowers. Over to you, Karam.
Thank you very much, Shan. Good morning to everybody. It's a great pleasure to share this platform with you all, and congratulations to PARI on launching of this toolkit. We really look forward to reviewing it, and also to the Kathrada Foundation for all the great work you've been doing, herding cats in civil society, getting us on the same page as we engage with government around important anti-corruption initiatives. I'll promise that my presentation is briefer than it takes to count the votes in Nevada. You will forgive me for repeating some of the things that have been said by some of the other colleagues. I think there's a significant alignment with a lot of what I want to say with what Florencia said in her introduction, and what Stefanie said in terms of how OUTA is approaching their work. I think most of you will know Corruption Watch as a nonprofit civil society organization, independent with no political or business alignments. Corruption Watch was launched in 2012 and intends to ensure that custodians of public resources act responsibly to advance the interests of the public. Ultimately, our objectives include fighting the rising tide of corruption and abuse in public funds by promoting broad principles around transparency, accountability, and good governance. And you know, I'm always struck at these presentations in the need to kind of take a brief step back to look at some of the broader context in which we find ourselves in 2020. I think we are right to focus on state capture, and it's, you know, I think there's some fatigue with what's happening at the Zondo Commission, but I think we have to remember that, you know, the Zondo Commission didn't just come out of nowhere. It was the process. It was a long fight following the reports and recommendations of the public protector. It involved challenges that went to court, and it really involved a process where the executive was really, you know, put to the task of establishing some type of a mechanism to review these issues. But I mean, I think we're sitting with a deep-seated accountability and transparency deficit. So, you know, I mean, if we just, you know, not even going back to the pre-apartheid era where we haven't seen a lot of accountability, but if we just look in the post-democratic era, whether it be the lack of follow-up on recommendations, lack of prosecutions flowing out of the TRC, the failure to deal with the land issue, the arms deal, 300,000 avoidable deaths as a result of HIV and AIDS, the Marikana massacre, state capture, and now the situation of COVID corruption. So, you know, we've arrived at a point where the rule of law has been undermined, where there isn't a culture where whistleblowing is promoted. And I think that within that, we can see the conditions whereby corruption, a culture of corruption has been allowed to fester. So then, the overriding question is, how do we turn this around? How do we ensure that our war against corruption is less about destroying something and more about building a new culture, a culture of accountability, a culture of transparency, and a culture of good governance? How do we build a culture of protected disclosures? So I think that's part of the question that I want to put front and center. I don't necessarily have any silver bullet answers, but I think it has to be the focus and the context in which we take this discussion forward. Corruption Watch, what has been our theory of change? Broadly, that as a result of citizens reporting their experiences of corruption to Corruption Watch or elsewhere, we can engage in a range of possible interventions that lead to greater exposure, accountability, legal recourse, and an activated citizenry, as well as building knowledge and understanding around how corruption operates and functions. Through this, as a society, we can promote ethical leadership and combat corruption, increase consequences for corrupt and unethical behavior, and create an active citizenry that can speak out against corruption. So that's been the theory of change at Corruption Watch. And since 2012, I think Corruption Watch has received something close to 30,000 reports of various kinds of maladministration, corruption, fraud, misconduct. So then what are the practical outcomes that come from blowing the whistle or utilizing the platforms that Corruption Watch provides to share information with us, that investigations take place? I have to note that the capacity to do deep dive forensic investigations is limited. Investigations also in a context where you don't have a mandate or powers to investigate, such as policing powers around search and seizure and the like, also does create some limitations on investigations, but Corruption Watch does attempt these investigations. Where possible, we write investigative reports and stories, media stories, particularly if what the whistleblower seeks is some kind of exposure or publicity, not necessarily for themselves, but for the issues. Referrals where appropriate to relevant authorities, and the requests for legitimate investigations. So one of the things that I found myself doing quite a bit this year is engaging with the SIU and trying to present matters where we feel they have a mandate, where they have an existing proclamation to look at matters. Presentations to other relevant authorities, including departments, including others in law enforcement, data analysis and trend reporting, recommendations around law and policy reform, community engagement, mobilization, and in the rare cases, litigation. One of the things we were asked to talk about, and I think the previous speakers have given indications to this about what is the current framework and what are the gaps. I think it's important to always go back to the Constitution as our kind of guiding document, as the guiding path for the values we promote, whether it be accountability, responsiveness, openness, equality before the law, non-discrimination, freedom of expression, freedom and security of the person. These need to be the touchstones. Obviously, the main piece of legislation, as discussed, has been the Protected Disclosure Act, but we also see, some hints around whistleblower protection and around the promotion of a culture of disclosure in the LRA, in the Companies Act, in the Protection Against Harassment Act, and in the Prevention and Combating of Corrupt Activities Act, which places a duty on those who, within the public service, who become aware of wrongdoing to report, so that there is this kind of duty to report and a duty to investigate. What does the legal framework that we have provide? Well, it does provide protection from retaliation. As I mentioned, it does provide a duty to investigate, a duty not to inflict any occupational detriment upon the whistleblower, protections from civil claims from breaching confidentiality, and requirements around having proper procedures in place for the receipt and investigations of complaints and providing feedback on investigations that take place. These are some of the communication protections that Florencia spoke about. Additionally, there is this obligation around good faith and around a standard of reasonable knowledge on the part of the whistleblower, and creating an offense around knowingly making false disclosures. Sorry, I'm working from home and I've got, hello. But you know, I think the point that's been made by Florencia and it's been made by others in some of the other recent webinars is that the problem that we sit with may not necessarily be around the base law, you know, the kind of the basic protections that we have in place. The problem is around how these laws get implemented, and then the problem is, as I've tried to hint, is around the culture around the law, whether it be within the public sector and the private sector to support the legal prescripts that are in place. And I think that's really where, you know, where we need to think about putting a big chunk of our attention. So I wanted to spend a few minutes just speaking a little bit about a case study, a matter that we've been working on since February of this year. Prior to lockdown, we had a face-to-face meeting with a senior manager at a state-owned enterprise who approached Corruption Watch with a number of allegations. He believed that the company had engaged in practices amounting to irregular and unlawful authorization of payments to various contractors. The types of allegations that he made were in line with other disclosures which had come out in relationship to this well-known SOE. And as you read through the lines of what I'm saying, you'll be able to figure out exactly where I'm talking about. This individual then reported the matter to the Zondo Commission, partially because of his suspicions around corruption. And it's important to note that he approached the Zondo Commission following a communique that went out from HR to all the employees of this company to encourage such reporting, noting that, that a Zondo Commission desk had been set up to receive such complaints. In the process of evaluating the disclosure made to the Zondo Commission, they issued an interim recommendation that the payments reported do not go ahead. This led to a court challenge. But I mean, I think critically what I want to point out in terms of this case study is that following the disclosure, the whistleblower has been subject to significant victimization at the hands of his immediate superior that led to him lodging a grievance. This is all now in 2019. That grievance was mediated. In fact, it was kind of a gaslighting type of situation where the whistleblower was, you know, agreed that he could continue with working with this superior because of a kind of an apology that was made. Subsequently, he was then disciplined by the company on charges relating to this grievance, which had already been resolved. The whistleblower has felt depression, leading to an extended medical leave. The company then engaged in at least two so-called independent investigations, where they quickly rushed to the media with reports which exonerated the manager in question of any allegations of corruption, including, you know, allegations that weren't even the subject to the whistleblower complaint. And in none of these exonerating press releases did the company engage with the issues around the alleged victimization. And they've directly and indirectly sought to discredit the whistleblower. You know, this has went so far as, you know, cheerleaders in the media, independent consultants, you know, writing articles and then going on radio saying, you know, this is a storm in a teacup. Look at this independent report, which has exonerated the individual, and yet, you know, the whistleblower is still sitting with his issues being unresolved. He's been moved out of his job as a general manager into another area where he doesn't have any expertise. and he's basically holding on. Am I running out of time, Shan? Okay, let me move on. Let me move on quickly. The question of incentives. There's been a lot of discussion around the False Claims Act in the US. I think this also relates to the notion of qui tam, where whistleblowers are able to file actions, and if it's found that there was irregular expenditure, there can be possible recoveries on the part of those whistleblowers. Should the government agree to take on the matter, the whistleblower and their legal representatives remain involved in the matter. If government declines to intervene, the whistleblower may still have opportunities to pursue those matters. The rewards in these cases can range from up to 15 to 30%. I think what's important to note is that the context of litigation in the US context is very different than it is in the South African context, and there is effectively a plaintiff's bar in the US where you can pursue claims, where you can pursue class actions, where you can take these types of qui tam claims forward. So I think it's something worth considering. I am somewhat sympathetic to what Stefanie has said in terms of the challenges around putting all of our eggs in an incentivized basket. But I do think it needs to be part of our reforms. If you look at the South Korean example, they provide monetary rewards for whistleblowers who disclose acts of corruption. The Korean Anti-Corruption and Civil Rights Commission may provide whistleblowers with rewards up to $2 million if their reports contribute directly to recovering or increasing revenues or reducing expenditure of public agencies. In addition to the issue of incentives, I think we need to address I'll just close on this point, Shan, on the issue of oversight and enforcement authorities. The need to have an independent body that can receive and investigate complaints around retaliatory discrimination or disciplinary action. And there are examples of this from Canada and from the US, which are worth looking at. Lastly, on what civil society needs to do more of, I think we need to do more in terms of the provision of legal support. Corruption Watch has been engaging with SASLaw, labor lawyers around creating panels around pro bono support. We spoke about the creation of a plaintiff's bar to support strategic litigation in this area. We need to look at the question around financial support to whistleblowers. It's not an easy one. We don't provide funding. We don't have the capacity to do that. Similarly, around the psychosocial support that whistleblowers require and the physical security support that they require. This goes beyond what Corruption Watch can currently do, but it is something that we speak to the whistleblowers about because they often do face these types of threats to their own personal safety. And then, the deepening of the research, building on what PARI is doing, looking at some of these international best practices, and then seeing how we can adapt them to our legal culture and legal environment. But I think my final message is one around culture. I think we can do a lot in terms of law and policy, but if we don't change the cultural constraints that lead to a culture of silence, we're not going to change this. We're not going to shift things in a significant way. Thank you.
Thanks, Karam. Apologies for pressurizing you to conclude. But I think everybody who is here today will get a sense of what the issues are and what at least Corruption Watch and OUTA are doing in this field amongst many others. And today is an indication that we really needed a whole day to talk in greater depth about the issue, and perhaps the various organizations who are here and the different people who pull this together would begin to consider a much more lengthier public engagement. But thanks, Karam. Coming up is Cynthia Stimpel, co-founder of Citizens of Conscience Foundation, which provides support to citizens with a moral conscience, including whistleblowers. She was head of financial risk management at SAA from 2006 to 2015, and its group treasurer until 2017. A decision to blow the whistles saved the state over 220 million and led to a suspension for over a year. And I think Cynthia has emerged as the kind of moral figurehead around whistleblowing work, amongst many others. And she's just come out of the Zondo commissions to come and talk to us here today. I don't know how you survive sitting in that environment, but thanks, Cynthia, for not only speaking to us here, but for being a presence in the commission itself, especially when the former board chairperson has been testifying and not testifying as she was supposed to have been doing. Over to you, Cynthia.
Thank you very much, Shan, and thank you to all the listeners. Thank you for welcoming me. Can you all hear me? Hear me clearly? Good.
We can.
Thank you, Vin. You can, great. Yes, I am sitting, currently I'm actually just outside the Zonda offices. I've been there since Monday, and I've come out now with Ms. Mayeni testifying via Zoom. So Shan, your question of how do I feel, I was totally exhausted for the 3 days, because when you see people lying so openly, it just boggles the mind. But I'm here today to speak to you more on the organization which I started with some other whistleblowers. The main reason was because we faced exactly what each other speaker was speaking about, Florencia, Stefanie, and Karam, that there isn't many avenues for whistleblowers to go to. So one is, yes, we do have various platforms that and whistleblowing hotlines that you can go to, which may have used. Once you've done that, the question is, now what? The now what is you're going to need legal representation. Where do you find it? It's not often that hotline can even advise you on legal representation. I was fortunate going through OUTA, and they were able to guide me and provide me with that. But it's not as obvious to everyone. And so therefore, with each of the steps that we face as whistleblowers is what's needed. When I did my focus was on stopping the transaction, which I did, and I worked very closely with Weber Wenzel, and we did stop it. I did not for 1 minute think that I would be victimized in the method that I did, and so I had to then find a labor lawyer, and so all those things, I thought I did my bit, but then I had to still continue going to CCMA, etc., with the labor representative. So again, we need to have all those type of issues in place. So the reasons why we started the Citizens of Conscience Foundation is a group of whistleblowers who came together, and we initially spoke about our stories. We all suffered similarly and in various degrees of retaliation or victimization or detriment. And as the others have already said, I'm not going to elaborate until there's more questions, but the key point is you do lose financially. You lose, most of us have lost our homes, or you lose your cars, or you lose your financial income, future and the current income, and where do you go from here? And so that's where we're going to focus on. One is we do have a Protected Disclosures Act. We do know that it has been amended in 2017, but it still does not protect you. In the Protected Disclosures Act, it has a section there that says employers and employees have the right and should be disclosing on issues. The employer obviously doesn't, and the employee does. This brings me to each of us. When we sign our contract with our individual employees, we already captured, because it says on the one side that you need to have confidentiality, which you sign. In another document, it says you need to disclose any unethical behavior or corrupt or fraudulent activities. And then when it's brought together, once you've disclosed it, they use the confidentiality clause in your employment contract against you. So that needs congruency, and I think that needs to be first worked on in organizations. The second part is that the protected disclosures needs to be worked on and enhanced, because once you've disclosed, there is no consequences for that company or person that you have disclosed against to have suffer any consequences or repercussions. Only the whistleblower suffers it. So there's a lot of work still to be done, and that's part of our plan, is to start looking at that and not on our own. We're not here as citizens of conscience to reinvent the wheel that OUTA already has done, or Corruption Watch, or any of the other civil societies that have already got platforms and activities in place. We want to collaborate with them. We want to work towards them so that there's an holistic way in how we deal with corruption and assisting whistleblowers. The other section we're looking at for assisting whistleblowers is financial. It's very hard for civil societies like Corruption Watch and OUTA to then try and find a way of assisting financially. The most they can do is from a legal perspective. OUTA, in their way, have assisted me by paying my legal fees, and I think Corruption Watch has done it for many others, and so has PLAF. But from there on, that whistleblower needs to pick up the pieces. How do they recuperate? So it's finding that platform. So our goal as citizens of conscience is finding a way of how do we set up perhaps a whistleblowing fund, and then finding the donors and support from corporates and really internationally and locally to fund on an annual basis that particular whistleblowing fund. And through that fund, then we are able to help the legal finance expenses and the financial aspects of the whistleblower, be it assisting in paying up their bonds or be it assisting in paying up their various loans. We don't know yet. We're going to do all that research, but it's what we want. That is our intention to try and build. There's another section is that the whistleblower is left on its own to suffer the detriment of what hit me now? How do I get up from this? And it has a psychological effect on that person. And if it's not treated earlier, you're going to depression. From depression, you're going to have psychological issues. And further, you're going to suffer perhaps even deeper psychiatric effects. And so we want to look at that. How do we deal with it and how do we manage it? And so we want to set up a panel of trauma counselors, psychologists, psychiatrists that are willing to do this and assist whistleblowers going through this journey without having to charge them, because they would have lost their medical aid, they would have lost even being able to continue medical aid. And so it's to find that method. So that's going to be our other aspect that we're looking at. And then the last part is looking at the safety of the whistleblower. Many of us have been threatened in our homes and been followed, and some of the whistleblowers have been killed, they've been murdered. There has been no safety for them. And it's trying to find the safety mechanisms. How do we protect that whistleblower? If besides looking at taking them out of their homes and putting them into a witness protection program, that's not the point. The point is that the more people speak out, you want to live in your homes with your family. So it's surrounding you in a protected environment. So it's looking at that aspect. The second is when that whistleblower has whistleblown, we want to put them in a safe environment. So if not in their homes, but not in a witness protection environment, but somewhere where they can recover from that trauma, feel better about themselves, train them, teach them how to some form of mental exercise, mindfulness, yoga, meditation, all that type of take care of your physical, mental, and health, and then bring them back into their family life so they continue being holistic. So that's what we're on about. The other question I'm supposed to talk about is how does whistleblower, the civil society assist? I brought it in my talk. They have assisted in the best way they can, but they haven't got the capacity. And so it's looking at how do we get more citizens to sponsor and more companies to sponsor those civil societies so that they do have the capacity, A, from a financial perspective, and B, from a resource perspective. And perhaps here, you could also, civil societies, hire us. We're out there, we're putting our hands up, that we can assist in many ways to help. The last aspect that I need to cover is on what international best practice are there for whistleblowers. It's been covered by both Karam and Stefanie on what's out there in the international society. So we do know what the US offers from a compensation perspective or from a payment for whistleblowers. And I know many people are against it, but how else do you stop it? And how else do you get people from speaking up? So I like the part that Stefanie mentioned about public procurement. So perhaps we look at that there's payment for public procurement side, not for every aspect, because people will use it for revenge, or they will use it for victimization, or some other method of getting money out of the system. And if you look in early days with apartheid, that's why the name of Nkomfe came out, is that people spoke out to take revenge on people who were trying to fight the apartheid system. And do you want that to be in the incentive, or do you want it to be from an ethical perspective and from a prevention of fraud and corruption? So that needs to be panned out, how we're going to look at incentivization for whistleblowers. So I would definitely look at it. It definitely has to be there, but you need to just premise it in a way that it's done properly. The other way is to look at how the Netherlands in there, it's in Dutch, Huis voor Klokkenluiden is the Dutch word, but it's really the house for whistleblowers. And I really like that option, and I think that's where we want to go to with citizens of conscience. And even if we don't bring it into our sphere, we look at avenues of building it, that you look at a holistic protection of that whistleblower, that yes, they can whistleblow. Yes, there will be the legal representative for them. Yes, there will be trauma counseling for them. Yes, there will be safe house for them. And yes, there will be the financial aspect. It's a huge way, and currently in the Netherlands, that is being sponsored by government. Government really sponsors that. They pay for it. We don't know in South Africa if that will be, but it's something we will research on and see if that's possible. And if it is possible, why not? If it's not possible, we then break it up into the various pillars and let the civil society take care of the whistleblowing. Let another society take care of the financial aspect, and let another society take care of how do you bring in the safety for that whistleblower. So I would like to conclude that we need to bring more awareness regarding whistleblowers. We need to make it more prevalent. Don't forget about us, because we're only in the media when there's an issue, and then everyone forgets about us, and we have to fend for ourselves. And it's now for us to keeping that whistleblowing to the fore. That's the only way. If you look at all the corruption that's happened in our country, it's the only way it's reached to a level where it can be stopped and brought out in the media was because of whistleblowers. So we need to be lauded, and definitely the awareness must be consistent all the time. Thank you for listening.
Thanks, Cynthia, and thanks for all that you're doing and for all that you plan on doing as well. There's not too much of time left. There are some questions that have been posed on the Q&A facility here, as well as the chat line. One of the issues, Cynthia, for you specifically is how do people contact citizens of conscience? Yeah.
Okay, thank you. We're relatively new. We've just registered in August of this month, and we in the currently building our website. Once we do that, so at the moment you can just use my contact details, Cynthia Stimpel @gmail.com. I will pass it on to the rest of the group, and they can get it from Ahmed Kathrada. You have all my details. I think that would be the easiest way. And my cell number, if you can write it down, 076-669-8829. Once we've built our website, we will definitely be advertising on forums like Ahmed Kathrada, OUTA, and Corruption Watch, and you will get our details from there. Thank you.
Advocate Sizani, there's a question posed here about the Public Services Commission. Now, I'm going to impose on you, if you're still here, just to very briefly talk about the role of the PSC and its collaboration, particularly with civil society. Advocate Sizani, are you still here?
Sean, he won't be able to.
Oh, okay.
He can't participate. He can only do it in writing. I'm happy to talk about in terms of.
Let him.
Yeah, I don't know. Let's see. I don't know if he's answering in writing. Okay. Now, certainly.
I don't know.
Of course, I'm not going to speak for the Public Service Commission, but certainly the work of the Public Service Commission has done. They do have the National Anti-Corruption Hotline, which is a hotline that can be used also to report anonymously, not only confidentially. And again, I think the only challenge that I think exists with that hotline is that if a complaint is received, that complaint is sent back to the department to investigate, which creates a bit of a challenge, as we were talking about maybe the need to have a separate independent entity that does the investigating and so forth of that complaint, as opposed to taking it back to the perpetrators or the people responsible for carrying out maybe that wrongdoing. But also, I mean, the Public Service Commission, they've done quite a bit of work now in terms of looking at a value-driven public service. So it's going back to what also Karam was talking about, that it's not just about whistleblowing, but how do we stop this from happening in the first place? And how do we create that kind of much more ethical culture, that sense of integrity and values that people speak up, and that is the norm and is not the exception. So those would be a couple of things that I would say, but I certainly don't cover everything the Public Service Commission has done.
Good. I suppose the question to OUTA, PARI, Corruption Watch, and to, well, others who might not be able to speak, how do we effectively collaborate to be able to offer more than we currently do, and to advocate for the kind of policy and legislative changes that many of the comments have alluded to here? Because each on our own, I think, will do as much as we can. Perhaps working collaboratively amongst those who are currently here and with many others as well, the reach might in fact be wider. And I think the kind of ideas that the citizens of conscience have alluded to, I think have important indicators of where the focus needs to be. So in closing, I'm just going to ask for comments from OUTA, Corruption Watch, and then I'll ask Cynthia as well, just to talk about more effective collaboration and areas that collaboration must in fact be targeted at. And then Mbongiseni will come in from PARI to wrap up the session as well. So let me ask from OUTA, just your closing thoughts.
Yes, thank you. I think this is a very good step in the right direction. who was the person that said about herding cats in civil society? I really think that sometimes we are our own worst enemy. If we can stand, together on so many issues, I firmly believe there will not be a problem. I think corruption would have been chased out of this country a long time ago. But be that as it may, we are growing, and I think this is moving in the right direction. So the suggestion, and I love the suggestion, Cynthia, because like I said in the beginning, our mandate is not whistleblowing per se. There's so many levels to whistleblowing. I mean, I'm reminded of when you're dealing with a witness, and it's the same thing, but a witness that needs to testify against a gang member. I mean, their lives get protected. That's a skill that you need. Financial support, that's a skill. What happens after, that's a skill. And that for one organization to do that is, or if they only do that, I mean, that is not, we certainly do not have enough resources to cater for everything, and you're talking about human lives. So maybe it is a question of how can we maybe, have these discussions more regularly, and I do think that is the way to bettering whistleblowing and creating a culture. And also, if I may suggest, is that one should get the youth involved. They sometimes do have I surely do not consider myself old, that's not what I'm saying, but get the youth that has got technological examples and all of that also they do some, think differently, and give also the youth the opportunity to have a say. And yeah, please, I think let's discuss this further. Great
Good.
idea.
Thank you, Karam. Your closing comments and thoughts about how to take this forward more effectively?
Yeah, thanks. I mean, I think very briefly on the narrow question, it might not be clear, it might not be obvious to the broad public, but we're already spending a lot of time talking to each other, and it's been an incredible pleasure for me since I joined Corruption Watch this year to be part of a broader civil society coalition. So we're already speaking with OUTA, we're already speaking with PARI. We do have existing fora, such as the Civil Society Working Group on State Capture, I think, which was brought together largely to engage with the processes at the Zondo Commission. But, perhaps going into the new year, Shan, I've got a lot of respect for the convening power and the role that the Kathrada Foundation has played, that we can continue to deepen the coalition work and think about the different streams of the work, based upon what others have said about the complexity of it. So in some ways, Corruption Watch is a whistleblowing organization, but we also do a lot of other things. So, whistleblowing should be a work stream, a collaborative work stream for the coalition partners. And, if we can continue to speak in the same voice, if we can continue to build consensus around these proposals, whether it be the establishment of an ombud in the Dutch model or law reform, then, when we do engage with government, our voices are that much, our positions are that much stronger, through the rough and tumble of engaging with each other. So I would say, continue to deepen the coalition work, recognize whistleblowing as a pillar of this work, and, keep the conversations like this one and the research and the advocacy going, ramp it up, increase the volume. Thank you.
Thanks, Karam. Cynthia, your closing thoughts and comments?
Thank you, Shan. Thank you again for this platform, for allowing us to speak. And as Karam speakers before me, is that we need to continue this awareness campaign. We need to continue this open talk about it. And I believe it's the collaboration of all of us to get this moving. What I'd like to close with is that I want to encourage whistleblowers. I know it's hard out there, and I know that we all, that the atmosphere and the climate is not ready for whistleblowers, but we cannot eradicate corruption if we don't speak out. No matter where we are, we see the corruption, we need to speak out at various levels. My goal and my pledge to you and everyone in South Africa right now is that we're going to this journey to whistleblower at every me. We will.
Everybody who joined in this morning, I want to thank the different speakers here, more so to launch of him, and which everybody will access today and start making it much more public, so that people can access it, can be aware of all of the tools that are available in that toolkit, as well as all of the contact channels that are available for whistleblowers. I think today's discussion has really indicated the need, and this has been a view in the Kathrada Foundation, that South Africa does need a national anti-corruption movement that will be able to do all of the kinds of things that have been alluded to in the discussion here today. It's at the tail end of corruption. If we were to be able to build the kind of corrupt-free society, that wouldn't need the work that whistleblowers are involved in to be done. But that being said, we are where we are, and when the Council of Churches and ourselves met with the President and members of Cabinet, a number of speakers did call on him to start getting government to acknowledging whistleblowing as an act of national service, as an act of national duty, and therefore recognizing whistleblowers as national heroes. And that is a discussion that I think we still need to pursue, because if we start getting that kind of change of mindset, I think this whole secrecy and almost tag of dirtiness around whistleblowers is what will begin to change. But that is long-term behavioral work that we all need to be engaged in. So I think civil society has a huge role to play in terms of more effective collaboration that is taking place, but we do need to strengthen it with the faith communities, with business, with labor. South African plan, the national plan to combat corruption, have been released. This has been in the making by civil society and government for a long while, and hopefully it will be launched either by the 9th or well before that, so that at least we have a sense of what is on the table and what we all need to be working towards. So on that note, let me just thank all of you, to thank the organizers for pulling to this particular webinar today, which primarily was aimed at launching this important report from PARI, for whom we all now need to thank, and a huge debt of gratitude to PARI and its staff for pulling all of this together. So thank you, everybody. Let's keep this conversation going. Let's use the information that is out there, and in our own ways, let's begin to plug in and support the various initiatives that are underway. Thank you. Bye.